Welcome back to Revise and Resubmit, the podcast that takes, those really dense academic papers and makes them surprisingly interesting. I'm Pavlov.
And I'm Nikita.
Today we're getting into some really interesting research, and this actually comes straight out of the readings for the Virtual Summer School in Entrepreneurship Research 2025.
Oh, that's right. It's amazing to think this is the 5th year already for that program. Started back in 2021, wasn't it?
It was, yeah. It's such a fantastic no-fee initiative. They've got 5 sessions lined up this year, 4 papers each, plus some book reviews sometimes.
And we really should give a shout out to the organizers.
Absolutely. Huge thanks to Professor Vishal K. Gupta and PhD candidate Athena Skiadopoulou, both from the University of Alabama. They've really spearheaded this whole thing, and it's just such a unique and valuable resource.
It really is. Providing that kind of platform for exploring the latest in entrepreneurship research, especially at no cost, is incredible.
Couldn't agree more. Okay, so for our deep dive today, we're focusing on something that maybe doesn't always get the spotlight when we talk about pitching.
Yeah.
The actual sound of your voice.
Yeah, not just what you say, but how you say it.
Exactly. We're going to unpack research looking at how the way an entrepreneur speaks, totally separate from the words, can influence whether they get funded, especially, in things like crowdfunding videos.
Which are so common now. And it's interesting, we all sort of feel like tone of voice matters, right? But this research tries to pin down how it matters in funding decisions.
Precisely. And it zeroes in on how vocal expressions shape 2 really key perceptions funders have: how passionate the entrepreneur seems and how prepared they come across.
Passion and preparedness, those feel like 2 huge pillars for any investor.
Definitely. So our mission today is to figure out, what specific vocal cues actually make a difference? What should entrepreneurs be thinking about?
Let's get into it. What's the source?
We're diving into a paper called Can You Hear Me Now? Engendering Passion and Preparedness Perceptions with Vocal Expressions in Crowdfunding Pitches. It's by Allison and colleagues, published in 2022 in the Journal of Business Venturing.
Okay, Allison et al., 2022. Got it. So what prompted them to look at voice specifically?
Well, they noticed this gap. Lots of research on pitch content, body language, even facial expressions. But the voice itself, the sound, was kind of missing.
Which is strange, especially, like you said, with online pitches. Often that voiceover is the main thing connecting you to the entrepreneur continuously. The visuals might change, but the voice is constant.
Exactly. And other fields, like psychology, have shown for ages how persuasive voice quality can be, beyond the literal words. So they decided to break it down using 2 fundamental dimensions of how we perceive voices and really any emotional expression.
Let me guess. Something like positivity and energy.
You got it. They call it valence, which is that positive versus negative quality, and arousal, which is the activation or intensity.
Yeah.
How energized or sort of subdued the voice sounds.
Right. So valence is like happy versus sad, maybe, and arousal is amped up versus calm.
That's a great way to put it. And these 2 dimensions basically underpin all our effective states. The researchers argue these are super important in pitch videos, especially crowdfunding, but maybe even for VCs now too.
Makes sense. So how do valence and arousal link to getting funded?
They focused on how these vocal cues influence those 2 key perceptions we mentioned: perceived passion and perceived preparedness.
Okay, so connecting the vocal dimensions to the funder's judgment.
Right. They knew some prior work hinted that entrepreneurs with, varied tone and pitch seemed more passionate. But this study wanted to get much more specific. What kind of variations matter, and how does this link to established theories about emotion and effect?
Gotcha. Going beyond just varied tone, how did they test it?
They use a really neat 2-study approach. First, a controlled lab experiment, and second, an analysis of real-world Kickstarter pitch videos.
Oh, nice. The experiment for control, the real-world data for, realism.
Exactly. Let's dig into study 1, the experiment first. This is where they really tried to isolate the voice.
Okay, how'd they set it up?
They kept the pitch content, the script, the visuals identical for all participants, but they had a professionally trained actor deliver this neutral script using 4 distinct vocal styles.
4 styles based on valence and arousal.
Precisely. They had high arousal positive, high arousal negative, low arousal negative, and low arousal positive.
So same words, but delivered maybe enthusiastically positive or intensely negative or calmly negative or calmly positive.
Exactly that. And they did manipulation checks to confirm the actor's delivery actually matched those intended dimensions. Crucially, to make sure people were only reacting to the voice, They removed video segments showing the actor's face.
Smart. Purely auditory cues, essentially. Who were the participants?
They recruited people from Amazon Mechanical Turk. But importantly, they screened them to make sure they had actually funded at least one crowdfunding campaign before.
Ah, so they're getting people with some real-world experience as backers. Good call.
Yeah, makes the findings more relevant. Then they measured a few things. Primarily, funding intentions. Would you fund this? Perceived passion, using an established scale focusing on perceived feelings and motivation, and perceived preparedness, using a scale about coherence and logic.
Okay, so what did they find? Did the voice style matter for preparedness?
It really did.
Right.
Participants rated the entrepreneur as significantly more prepared when there was what researchers called valence arousal congruence.
Congruence, meaning?
Meaning the valence and arousal sort of fit together in a specific way. In this case, preparedness was highest in the high arousal negative condition and the low arousal positive condition.
Huh. High energy negative or low energy positive? That's interesting. Not high energy positive.
And not for preparedness, no. Preparedness seemed higher when those two combinations occurred, compared to the conflict conditions, high arousal positive and low arousal negative.
It's almost like intense negativity signals serious focus on challenges, and calm positivity signals confident control. Maybe that's why it reads as prepared.
That's a really interesting interpretation.
Yeah.
The researchers suggest it's about a kind of coherence that we perceive. Okay, what about passion?
Right, the other big one. What drove perceptions of passion?
Here it was much simpler. Arousal was the key. Participants rated passion significantly higher in both high arousal conditions, positive and negative, compared to the low arousal conditions.
So just having that vocal energy, that intensity, signals passion, regardless of whether the tone is upbeat or serious.
Seems like it. If you sound energized, you sound passionate. Then they did some mediation analysis.
Okay, seeing how these perceptions linked to actual funding intentions.
Exactly. They found that the valence arousal congruence effect, the thing boosting preparedness, had an indirect positive effect on funding intentions through perceived preparedness.
Makes sense. Sounding prepared makes people more likely to fund you.
And the high arousal effect, the thing boosting passion, had an indirect positive effect on funding intentions through perceived passion.
Same logic. Sounding passionate also makes people more likely to fund. Did they interact at all?
Yes. They found an interaction effect in study 1. Perceived passion had a stronger positive relationship with funding intentions when perceived preparedness was also high.
Ah, so passion is great, but it's even better for getting funding if you also come across as knowing what you're doing. The combination is powerful.
That's exactly it. One quick side note. They also checked how the voices made participants feel. Congruent voices led to more positive feelings in the participants, and high arousal voices made participants feel more aroused or activated themselves. And both of those feelings also nudged funding intentions upward.
Interesting. So the voice affects the backer's own emotional state, too.
Right. Okay, so that's the controlled experiment.
Yeah.
But does this hold up in the wild? Let's talk study 2, the analysis of real Kickstarter videos.
This is the real test, isn't it? Moving from the lab to actual pitches where money changed hands.
Totally. They got data from 558 Kickstarter campaigns launched between 2009 and 2016, all of which had videos containing speech. They looked at the amount of money pledged using a log transformation, because funding amounts can be really skewed.
Makes sense. How did they measure the voice characteristics, valence, and arousal across hundreds of videos? Not actors this time.
Right. They use technology,
Right.
specifically something called speech effect analysis, or SAA, using an API from a company called Beyond Verbal.
Okay, AI for emotion in voice. How does that work, roughly?
Well, the software analyzes the audio signal, looking at things like pitch contours, the timing, energy levels, various acoustic patterns, and compares these features to a massive database of voices that have already been tagged with specific valence and arousal levels.
So it's pattern matching against known emotional expressions in voice.
Pretty much. They validated its accuracy, including on their own data. They analyzed the audio in short, 10-second overlapping chunks, and discarded any chunks where the software wasn't confident it was hearing speech, like if there was too much music.
Okay, so they get valence and arousal scores for segments of each pitch video. How do they measure that congruence thing again?
They created a measure based on the distance from a theoretical line, where high arousal pairs with negative valence and low arousal pairs with positive valence. That pattern they found linked to preparedness in study 1.
Got it. And how did they measure perceived passion and preparedness for these real videos? Did the AI do that too?
No, for that they went back to humans. They had 3 trained experts watch the videos and rate perceived passion and preparedness using the exact same scales as Study 1. And crucially, the experts showed strong agreement in their ratings.
Ah, okay. So AI for the objective vocal features, human experts for the subjective perceptions. That's a solid approach.
Very thorough. And they didn't stop there. They controlled for a ton of other stuff that could influence funding.
Like what?
Oh, project category, funding goal, video length, whether the entrepreneur was actually visible, how close their face was to the camera, even the brightness and color saturation of the video, background music, number of people on the team, loads of things.
Wow, okay. They really tried to isolate the voice effect amidst all that other noise in a real pitch video. So what were the results? Did the lab findings hold up?
Largely, yes. They found that valence arousal congruence, remember, high arousal negative or low arousal positive, was a significant predictor of perceived preparedness, just like in the experiment. And higher perceived preparedness predicted more funding.
Okay, so that link holds. Voice congruence, perceived preparedness funding. What about passion?
Same story there too. Higher vocal arousal was a significant predictor of perceived passion. And higher perceived passion, in turn, predicted more funding.
Fantastic. So voice arousal perceived passion funding, it seems that those core mechanisms replicated really well in the real world data.
They did. It adds a lot of confidence.
Yeah.
There was one difference, though. Remember that interaction effect from Study 1 where passion was extra powerful when combined with high preparedness?
Yeah.
That interaction wasn't statistically significant in the Kickstarter data.
Interesting. Any thoughts on why? Maybe in the real world, with so many other factors flying around, that specific synergy is harder to detect. Or perhaps it just matters less when compared side by side with hundreds of other projects.
That could be it. The researchers suggest maybe the effect depends on whether the people rating passion preparedness are also the ones making the funding decision, which was true in Study 1, but not Study 2, where experts rated and backers funded.
Plausible. Did they do any other checks?
Yeah, they did a robustness check using a different way to calculate congruence, just multiplying valence and arousal scores, and got similar results, which further supports the main findings.
Good to know. Okay, so let's try and synthesize all this. What are the big takeaways?
Well, the clearest message is your voice matters. A lot. It's not just filler between the important words. It's actively shaping how potential funders see you, especially in terms of preparedness and passion.
Right. And we have some specific clues now about how it matters.
Exactly. If you want to be perceived as prepared, the key seems to be that vocal congruence, having your vocal energy match the emotional tone in a specific way, either that calm positivity or that intense, focused negativity.
So maybe not being overly bubbly when discussing serious market challenges, or too flat when outlining the big vision. Aim for that coherence.
That seems to be the implication for preparedness. And if you want to be perceived as passionate,
Then it's about arousal. Cranking up the vocal energy, the intensity, the activation in your voice.
precisely. And interestingly, that worked whether the underlying tone was positive or negative.
Yeah.
High energy seemed to signal passion either way.
Which is fascinating, right? Because you might think passion is only about sounding excited and positive, but this suggests intensely focusing on overcoming a problem can also read as passion.
Absolutely. And they found that a surprising number of real pitches did contain segments with negative valence in the voice, even if the overall message was positive. So it's not unrealistic.
And ultimately, while that interaction effect was a bit tricky, the overall picture suggests that hitting both notes sounding passionate and prepared is likely the sweet spot.
Definitely seems like a powerful combination to aim for. It addresses both the heart and the head of the funder, doesn't it?
It really does. So, a provocative thought for everyone listening.
Good point.
Think about the last presentation you gave, or even just a meeting where you were trying to persuade someone. Or flip it. Think about a leader or speaker you find compelling. Pay attention to their voice. Can you hear that interplay of valence and arousal? How might it be affecting how prepared or passionate you perceive them to be?
Ooh, that's a great exercise. Turning this research lens onto our own experiences, I like it. You might learn a lot just by listening differently.
Exactly.
And of course, if you want all the methodological details, the stats, the nuances we didn't cover, we absolutely recommend reading the original paper by Allison and colleagues in the Journal of Business Venturing.
Definitely worth a read for those who want the full picture.
Thank you so much for joining us and exploring the hidden power of the voice in pitching.
Hope it gave you something to think about.
Join us next time for another exploration.
And don't forget to subscribe to Revise and Resubmit on Spotify and Apple Podcasts. And if you're enjoying the show and want to support us in creating more insightful content, consider becoming a patron on Patreon. Every contribution helps us continue this journey of exploration and discovery. Until next time, keep those minds curious, keep questioning, and keep revising and resubmitting.